Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster with SAG-AFTRA Foundation, and thank you so much for tuning in to watch another one of our conversations at home today. Before I hand over to today's amazing panel, I want to remind everyone watching these videos that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization, and we're continuing to raise funds for a COVID-19 Emergency Assistance Fund. This fund is working to support actors who are all out of work right now due to film and television productions being closed across the board. It is helping actors with paying basic bills, making rent, utilities, buying groceries, whatever it is they need to get by day to day at the moment. So please check out the details below this video and consider supporting if you're able to in any way. And it is my absolute pleasure to hand over to our moderator today, the wonderful Jazz Tangcay.
Thank you, Mara. My name is Jazz Tangcay, and I'm so excited for today's conversation with actor and director Delroy Lindo. Just to give you a little bit of background, his first appearance was in 1976 in John Candy's Find the Lady, and then it was onto theatre where he appeared in Master Harold and the Boys, Othello, and The Exonerated. Since then, he has appeared in over 40 films and acted in over 20 theatre productions. Delroy's received a SAG Award nomination for his performances in Cider House Rules and Get Shorty. He's also received a Tony Award nomination and a Drama Desk nomination for Joe Turner's Come and Gone. Most recently, fans of CBS Access would have seen him in The Good Fight as Adrian Bozeman. And next up, we're about to see him in Spike Lee's The Five Bloods as Paul. It is my absolute honor to introduce Delroy Lindo. Hi, Delroy.
Hello. How are you? Thanks. Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. All things considered.
Yeah.
I was speaking with somebody this morning, and the principle that I am trying to live by during this period is the principle of perspective and counting my blessings. And I'm acutely aware that I am, my circumstances are a lot better than many other people. So I'm fine. I'm good.
Whereabouts are you quarantining in this time?
I'm quarantining in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay. Not in LA. A lot of people, are in LA.
No, I have no problem with LA. I don't live there. I live in, excuse me, I live in Northern California.
Okay. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, just, to go over your incredible career. Just reading that introduction alone is, what you've done is amazing, all your different roles, but also I'm so excited to talk about The Five Bloods and working with Spike Lee for the fourth time, right?
Fourth, correct.
Wow. So let's just go all the way back. One thing that I've read about you and heard you say is, you first fell in love with acting in the school play in the Nativity play. So what was it back then that made you say, this is what I want to do when you're that age?
I think it had to do with a vague sense that I might be good at it. Now, I need to explain what I mean by that. I played one of the kings, right? We three kings of Orient are, and I had to walk down a hallway with all the audience members on both sides. And during rehearsal, we had to learn our lines on these white cardboard, piece of cardboard, about yay wide and maybe yay high. And I remember that the young man who was playing King Herod, his name was Michael Penny. I will never forget this. And Michael Penny had a really hard time remembering his lines. He would read from the card, but when it was time to memorize what he had to say, he just had a problem. And I remember the teacher who was directing the play saying, Michael, watch Delroy. Just watch what he does and how he does it. It was something like that. And this really actually does not have to do with ego. It really doesn't. But it does have to do with being affirmed. Mm-hmm. And aside from the fact that I was enjoying what I was doing, being affirmed in that way, being given the sense that I was maybe doing something that was positive and getting somebody's attention in a positive way. And it really was not ego. It had more to do with being affirmed. And I think that was the initial connection, that the spark went off, I think. And the seed was planted, that evolved into, when I grow up, I want to be an actor.
Yeah.
One thing I will say about that production that was not good, they made me wear these earrings.
Oh my God.
I guess it was, oh my God is right. I guess it was their interpretation of something exotic. And I was embarrassed as hell. So I remember walking down this aisle, we three kings, and shaking my head, trying to shake these earrings loose. That wasn't good. But the affirmation for what I was doing was wonderful.
Oh my gosh, the school productions back in the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So were you like the first actor in your family? Because it sounds like it was like totally in your DNA, right? At that age.
Yes, I'm the first actor in my family. It's certainly a part of my DNA now.
Yeah.
I would say that at that time, when it was an ambition, when it was an unrealized ambition, it was certainly something that I felt really strongly about. But I would not necessarily say it was in my DNA at that time. That has evolved. Yeah. And in actuality, you know, when I told my mom, who's no longer with us, that I wanted to be an actor, it was a completely alien concept for her, and caused her a lot of consternation because she really didn't understand what it was I was getting into, and I didn't understand what it was I was getting into. But yes, I am the first actor in my family, and in terms of being part of my DNA, that has evolved over time.
Yeah. Was there a musical or theatrical production or a film, something that struck you later on that made you continue with this seed and water it, to be like, this is really what I want to do?
Are you talking about when I was young? When
you were younger, yeah.
Not really.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, this is what I will tell you, and you will probably relate to this. When I was very, very young, there was a musical theater performer in England, and I believe his name was Brian Rix. And it was a pantomime that I went and saw. Mm-hmm. I was very, very young. And I remember he had makeup on, and I knew he had makeup on because he was sweating, and he was sweating his makeup off, and he was dripping. But there was something, I don't know, magical, and I don't want to say transformative, but there was something magical that I connected with personally. And ironically, it didn't have to do with this gentleman, Brian Rix. It had to do with the experience. Mm-hmm. And that was a seed.
Yeah.
I was very, very young. That was a seed that, you know, if one thinks about these thoughts and these ideas and these ambitions as seeds, that was another seed that was planted that would eventually grow into this thing.
Yeah.
And this thing that's sitting in front of you right now.
I think we're going to have to explain what the pantomime is to the American audience who aren't familiar with this.
I got you. You may be able to explain this much better than I, but my recollection is it is an annual pageant, an annual piece of theater that occurs at Christmas time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Christmas time. And I guess the closest thing we have here in America are the annual productions of Christmas Carol, or Christmas Carol, that happen in theaters all over this country at Christmas time. And in England, the pantomime is an annual theatrical pageant that is part of British culture. And this, if I'm remembering accurately, this person, Brian Ricks, was in a pantomime and I went to see it. It must have been Christmas time.
I love it. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, everybody goes at Christmas time. Usually you're really young when you go, like, you know, your parents take you, and it's a very, it's an experience that you never forget. Usually they do things like, you know, Jack and the Beanstalk, Aladdin.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not even sure what this pantomime was. I don't know if it was Jack and the Beanstalk or Aladdin. I don't remember. But I do remember being very young, sitting in the theater, and I remember his makeup was dripping, which didn't bother me at all, but it contributed to somehow the I don't know, the humanness and the magic of the experience.
So you first worked with Spike Lee on Malcolm X.
Yeah.
And, you know, Spike has this incredible sense of casting and what he wants to achieve. You know, he's a master at what he does. So take us back, all the way back to 1992 and how it happened, like what you remember about that audition.
I was working on a film. I had worked for many years. I come from the theater. I was in New York City. I was a New York theater actor. So I'd worked for the first probably 10 years of my career in the theater in New York. And towards the end of that arc, that period of time, I did the play that you mentioned earlier, Joe Turner's Come and Gone. Brilliant, brilliant play by August Wilson. And I played a character named Harold Loomis. And rumor has it that Spike was in the audience on opening night. And he saw me in that play. And that play was the culmination of 2.5 years of extraordinary theater work for me. I did a production in 1986 of A Raisin in the Sun, and I played Walter Lee. And then I went to do my first out-of-town production of Joe Turner's Come and Gone. And then I went to Los Angeles to do another production of A Raisin in the Sun and playing Walter Lee again. And then I went back to play Harold Loomis. And then I played Harold Loomis 3 more times before we eventually ended up in New York. I mentioned that because going back and forth between those two masterful parts, those big classical parts, Walter Lee Younger and Harold Loomis and Joe Turner, my work as an actor grew exponentially. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my instrument. And it was just an extraordinary time in my personal and professional life being able to do those plays. So in the spring of 1988, we were on Broadway. I was on Broadway with Joe Turner's Come and Gone. Spike saw the play. Mm-hmm. He then asked me a couple of years later to come in and audition for West Indian Archie and Malcolm X. However, the first call that I got, I was working on a film in Northern California. I was working with a director named Taylor Hackford, and I received a call saying, Spike, we were in Northern California, and I received a call from my representative at the time saying, Spike Lee wants to meet you. Will you fly down to Los Angeles to audition for Malcolm X, this film Malcolm X? I flew down to Los Angeles. I got to the audition room. I remember there was a camera on a tripod. There was a casting director. There was a young lady sitting in the back of the room, and there was no Spike Lee. So it turned out that I was doing an audition with the casting director on camera for Spike, who I assume was in New York. I was really, 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 really upset and annoyed. I did the audition, I left the audition, and I called my representative at the time and I said, Spike was not there. I was really disappointed. I need to audition again because I hadn't felt that I had done such a good job. Some weeks later, I was in New York. Spike called me back in. Denzel was there, and I knew Denzel because Denzel and I had been in school together at a place called the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco.
Right.
So I was reading with Denzel, which was much better. We did the audition. We did the scene. I don't remember which scene it was, but we did a scene. We may have done 2 scenes. And I had to leave. At the end of the audition, Spike said, I need you to wait. I need you to wait. I need to do another, I don't remember why, but he wanted me to wait around. And I couldn't. I was doing another film and I had to fly back to Los Angeles. I said, I'm sorry, man. I got to go. I got a plane. I literally had a plane to catch.
My gosh.
I got on the plane. By the time I landed in Los Angeles, I got a call from my rep at the time saying, you got the part. There is an addendum to this story, and I'll give you the really, really, really brief addendum. I didn't like the deal that Spike was, I didn't like the money that Spike was offering me. So I kept saying to my representative, no, you got to talk to Spike. You got to get me more money. He couldn't get me more money. Then I got a call saying Spike wants to talk to you. I refused to talk to Spike. I said, no, I'm not talking to Spike.
Oh my God.
Because I thought that Spike was going to try to get me to work for the money that he was offering, and I did not wish to do that. So I said, no, I'm not talking to Spike. You work it out. I got another call saying Spike really wants to talk to you. No, man, I'm not talking to Spike. You work it out. At that point, my wife said, talk to Spike. I said, I'm not talking to Spike. My wife said, talk to Spike. I'm not talking to Spike. It was a Friday.
Oh my goodness.
I was in Los Angeles. I was in this we were visiting somebody that we knew. I was in this opulent house in the Hollywood Hills. I got a call from my representative saying, the offer has been pulled. I said, what? The offer has been pulled. The offer is no longer on the table. I was sitting out by this pool. I came into the room where my wife was. She said, I was gray.
Oh my gosh.
I was great. And I'm not going to say exactly what she said, but essentially it was, I told you to talk to Spike. Anyhow, that weekend I made frantic calls, eventually talked to Spike's producer, John Killick. And I said, I want to talk to Spike. I've been trying to get you to talk to Spike for a week and a half. No, but now I want to talk to Spike. No. The part has been offered to somebody else.
Oh my God.
Okay. If this other actor, and I will not say the name of the actor, if this other actor does not do the part, then we'll get you and Spike together to see if you can work it out. That was a Friday. I flew back to the East Coast. I was living right outside of New York City. We stopped in Philadelphia. We had a prayer circle in Philadelphia with some friends of ours. I told them what had happened. I was completely distraught. Got back to my house in Jersey. Sunday evening, my phone rang. It was Spike.
The power of prayer.
Power of prayer, God dog it. Spike said, look, man, I was trying to talk to you. I know I misunderstood. He said, okay, this other actor has the script, and he is supposed to let us know by tomorrow, by Monday, if he is going to do the part. If he wants to do the part is his. If he does not want to do the part is yours. I will tell you that when Spike told me the name of the actor who was considering the part, even though he's an incredible actor and a very well esteemed, a legend, when he told me the name of the actor who had the script, I knew that I was going to get the part. Not because he's not a great actor. He is, yeah. But I just felt that that part was mine. And sure enough, Monday morning, Spike called me and said, "You're in." That's the short version of that story.
That is an amazing story.
It is an amazing story for a number of reasons, because had I not done that, had I not played West Indian Archie in Malcolm X, Spike would not have offered me Crooklyn the following year. He would then not have offered me Clockers the following year, and that led directly to my being offered Get Shorty. Wow. So I guess the moral of the story, if there are any actors out there watching, I'm going to say something that is completely obvious, and hubris back in 1992 did not allow me to accept this. It's not always about the money. It's not always about the money. So that is an amazing story. And one of the smartest things I ever did in my life and in my career was play the part of West Indian Archie for the money that Spike offered me, which in turn led to that kind of kickstarted my film career after years of being a theater actor.
Right. And then you did Get Shorty, which was a big Hollywood studio film. Like, what was that experience like, going from, you know, doing Malcolm X, Crooklyn?
It was Malcolm X, and then it was Crooklyn, and then it was Clockers, and then it was
Get Shorty, right?
Shorty. And the experience was really illuminating for me for a variety of reasons. This was my first time doing a big Hollywood film. John Travolta, Gene Hackman, Rene Russo, a fantastic script based on a fantastic book. And after working with Spike, and they were studio films, Get Shorty was different. And I immediately recognized the difference. There was just more of everything. There was just more of everything on that production. It did not mean at all that that the end product was any better than what I had experienced with Spike, but all of the extras on that production. I'll give you an example. My first day of filming on Get Shorty, I walk into my camper, and there's this huge bag of sporting goods. This huge bag filled with sneakers and sweatpants and sweatshirts and t-shirts. And I looked at this bag, and I remember picking the bag up and taking it outside to one of the assistant directors and saying, "This was in my camper, and this must be a mistake because it's not for me." And he said, "Oh, no, that's for you." So that was my first experience with, I guess it's called swag, right? I thought it was a mistake. And that's just one example. There were just lots and lots of extras on this production that I had not had before. I had a cell phone. The cell phone was about that long and about that thick. And I could make calls on this cell phone that, per my contract, I didn't have to pay for.
The brick cell phone, right?
It was a brick. Yeah. So there were just lots of extras.
Yeah.
But, you know, the work was phenomenal, and it's a wonderful film.
Yeah. And it is, and to this day, it still holds up. It's great to go back and revisit. And here we are in 2020, and, you know, The Five Bloods is your fourth collaboration with Spike. Like, you know, before we get into talking about Paul and what he said to you, like, how have you grown in that time just as an actor? And, like, you directed along, you
I've
directed
directed in the theater. I've directed in the
theater
theater.
along the way. So
Yeah.
like, how is that process, how have you grown in that process before you started?
There are a couple of events that occur to me in terms of my growth as an actor. As I mentioned, the 2.5 years of working in the theater on Walter Lee and Harold Loomis, I grew exponentially as an actor.
Mm.
But I remember, I believe it was, oh man, it was the early 1990s. I can't remember the year, but I was working on Gone in 60 Seconds, which I guess was 2000. And I was invited to the Sundance Film Institute. And I went. There was a gap in the production, and I went. And I went to the Sundance Film Institute as I don't know what they're called, but my job was to go around to the various projects that were in development at the Sundance Film Institute and give feedback to the actors and the directors. And they were all workshopping. They were all workshopping their material. And I remember I had an extraordinary time. But one of the things that I very, very definitely remember was when I was going around and giving feedback to the actors and the directors in the Sundance Film Institute, I realized that I knew more about the acting process than I had theretofore given myself credit for. I knew stuff. And the things that I was saying to the directors and the actors seemed to be helping them. And I was being told, my God, that makes sense what you just said. Oh, wow, thank you for that, man. Thank you for that insight. And so it was incredible. It was profoundly affirming.
Yeah.
And I want to believe that that was also a significant step forward in terms of my growth as an actor.
Yeah.
Directing has informed who I am as a director. It's been edifying and educational for me as in my own acting, directing other actors, directing productions. So they are instances in which I am aware, I feel that I have grown as an actor. The directing, I've directed material that I feel very strongly about. So I have a connection, I have a visceral connection to the material. And the fact that I am able, not all the time, but in many instances, I'm able to communicate with actors what I want, help them get what they want so that we can create a production. And those things not only are affirming, and it does not have to do with ego. It really doesn't, but it does have to do with being affirmed as a worker, as a creative worker, and therefore having a sense that I am growing, and I bring all of that experience to my work as an actor.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Did I answer your question? Because I ramble.
You absolutely did.
Okay.
You did.
Okay.
So let's get to the five bloods.
Yes.
I've studied history. I've lived in America for 5 years. Didn't know about, African Americans serving in Vietnam, never taught it. It took Spike Lee to teach this lesson.
Yes. Yes. That's an extraordinary thing you just said. And it's more extraordinary than you know. But please finish what you were saying.
No, I was going to say, what did you know? Because you grew up, you moved here when you were young, and then you grew up here, but they don't teach it in American history, right?
They do not. There are many things. There are many things having to do with the history of African descended people that are not taught. And likewise in England. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to digress just for a minuscule second. I went to school in England. I knew nothing about the Windrush experience. Nothing. I knew nothing about that whole phenomenon until, and for those of you who do not know, oh God, I know I'm digressing, but okay. The Windrush was a boat that took over 300 Caribbean men, mostly Jamaican men, to England in 1948. The arrival of that boat carrying these 300 plus Jamaican men and some Polish women apparently were also on that boat, started an influx of Caribbean people into the United Kingdom, so that those men and the offspring of those men became known as the Windrush Generation. And that was a movement of Caribbean peoples into England and the United Kingdom. My mother was a part of that movement of people. I knew nothing about that because I had not been taught that, to your point.
Right.
And I didn't know anything about Windrush until the early 2000s, when I went back to London to do a film. And in preparing to do the film, I learned about Windrush. So, to your point about the history of African descended people not being taught in the schools, it's not just America, it's in England also. However, with regard to African American history, or the contributions of African Americans, the contributions of African descended people not being taught. Fast forward to now, and what makes this film, one of the things that makes this film profoundly special and profoundly particular, is the fact that it is a story set inside a conflict, in this case, the Vietnam War, and you have 5 African-American men front and center in terms of how that story is being told. And one can think back to films like Apocalypse Now, Platoon, Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan, even though that is a World War II film. But all of those films have something in common. And what they have in common is that if there were Black soldiers present, they were not a central part of how those stories were told. This film is particular and special in that regard. And it does tell a history lesson. And for me, and I'm sure for the other actors, that is what makes this profoundly particular and special, that we are front and center, and the story is unfolding through the lens of our experience.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you what that makes me feel. It is a history lesson. The other thing that makes this film special in particular, I feel, successfully crosses over into, it's a cross-pollination of many genres. You know, it's a war film, it's a comedy, it's a buddy film, it's a history lesson, it's a love story, because in the final analysis, I believe this to be a love story with these men, amongst these men. Yeah. So he's covering a lot of bases, and it's wonderful for me to hear you say, prior to this film, I didn't know X, Y, and Z, and because of Spike, I now know X, Y, and Z, and that's very affirming.
Right, and it's all, you know, there's nobody else who's better equipped or better, you know, to tell the story than Spike, in my opinion. You talked about, you know, the brothers, you know, and that family feeling. Like, how much time did you spend together prior to shooting? You know, the movie, because that camaraderie it's so powerful. You know,
I'm so glad to hear you say that.
I can't say what happens at the end, but you know.
Right. Man, that's, you know, I have to say, I mean, this is turning into a love fest, and perhaps that's a very saccharine thing to say, but it really is extremely affirming to hear you talk about the aspects of the film that you responded to as audience. The answer to your question is I didn't have a lot of time. I was working on a television series in New York for a while. It was complicated. With the schedules, my schedule on the TV show, and making it work with the schedule of for the film, because Spike needed me to be in Thailand at a certain point, and I was not scheduled to be wrapped on my television series, and it was clashing. I will take this time to say that God bless Michelle and Robert King, the producers of The Good Fight, the show that I was working on. God bless Brooke Kennedy. They made the schedule work, and it was and God bless my fellow actors, my compadres on The Good Fight, because they turned themselves into pretzels to accommodate me so that I could get out at a certain point and fly straight to Thailand. I finished working on The Good Fight at probably 2 in the afternoon. I went home, I finished packing, and I got on a plane at 11:30 that night, and I flew to Thailand. So I did not have a lot of prep time. However, we bonded very quickly. I had not worked with any of the actors prior to this film. Isaiah Whitlock and I think I may have mentioned, we went to the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco together, but we had not worked together. I had seen Norm Lewis in Porgy and Bess in New York on Broadway. I had seen Clark Peters in London in 1997 in a production of Guys and Dolls, but we had not worked together. But having said all of that, we bonded very quickly. And that was part of the what also made this experience special, because what ended up happening, we almost by necessity, and because we were working on a very tight schedule, we spent a lot of time together. And for me, the times that the cast and I, the 5 of us spent, or the 4 of us, Chadwick came later, but the time that we spent in the hotel at breakfast, on the weekends at lunch, just bonding. Again, it sounds so saccharine, but we were connecting. And the connections that we made off camera eventually translated directly into our work in front of the camera. And I have to say that even though Chadwick arrived in Thailand maybe 5 weeks after the rest of us, he didn't miss a beat. He didn't miss a step. He folded right in, and he became part of that bond. This was an experience in which, in addition to the fact that we were working on tremendous material that we were all committed to, the connection that we made as people, the connection that we made as men, the connection that we made as Black men, all fueled the work that we did in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And of course, I have to include Spike in that, because he brought us all together. And you mentioned, a half hour ago when this interview started, that he has a knack for casting, and he brought us all together. And I want to believe that it worked.
And it absolutely did. And I have to say, this is absolutely one of your best performances. I've loved everything you've done, but this by far is it's so powerful. And Paul is so intense. Like, there's so many scenes, and I don't want to go into it because I don't want to ruin it for anybody. Right. But, there's the scene on the boat, and I'll keep it as vague as that. But I think you know which one I'm talking about. Like, it's a very intense performance. Like, how did you tap into him, especially when you went from Adrian on The Good Fight straight into Paul on The 5 Bloods?
Once again, I'm going to credit the connection that we all very quickly created. because we did have, I don't remember how much time when I got to Thailand. I think I got to Thailand March 16th last year, 2019. And maybe we had a week, maybe we had 9 days or so before we started filming. I'm not clear about that. But the fact is, we spent a lot of that time going over, the four of us, and Spike. And we rehearsed. And when I say we rehearsed, obviously it was not a rehearsal like the kind of rehearsal one does in the theater, but we were sitting around, we were doing table work, what's called table work in the theater. We were sitting around the table with our scripts, and we were going over certain scenes in the screenplay. A couple of times we went on location and we would rehearse scenes. All of that time we were bonding and connecting. And that helped me in terms of separating from Adrian Bozeman and inhabiting Paul. Mm-hmm. I will say that prior to getting to Thailand, I also, I have a couple cousins who are Vietnam vets. They came and spent time with me in Jersey, and gave me this gift. They gave me the gift of sharing with me their experiences in Nam, and also sharing with me their specific and particular experiences with PTSD. That was a gift. They were gifts that I was bequeathed. And this was before I got to Thailand, but I started working. I then was introduced to a gentleman who, a retired general, who in turn put me in touch with 4 Vietnam vets, and I spoke with them on the phone, 4 or 5. Another friend of mine then put me in touch with a lady who was a retired major, and she had been in Iraq. She spent time with me very generously, talking about not only her experiences in the military, but very specifically communicating with me about her negotiation of PTSD. I looked at films, I read books. So I'm saying all of that to say that all of the research that I engaged, speaking with the vets, looking at documentaries, reading books, and that process continued after I got to Chiang Mai, after I got to Thailand. And all of those things cumulatively helped me build a foundation for myself with their help. All of the people who spoke with me, who spent time with me, they were part of my building a foundation. I then I continued looking at material and exposing myself to material after I got to Chiang Mai. All of that, it was all critical in helping me build the foundation for for the work, and leaving, inhabiting Paul after having inhabited Adrian Bozeman. One small thing, there's a book called BLOODS. It's edited by a man named Wallace Terry. I had read BLOODS many years ago, and they are the book. They're excerpts. They are verbatim stories told by African American vets. And I read BLOODS again, and there are photographs of these men in the book. And one of the photographs, the gentleman was smiling, and I noticed his teeth. And his teeth were very dissimilar to my own teeth. And I called my dentist, and I sent my dentist a photograph of this man. And I said, can you build me a thing I can, that I can put over my teeth. What do you call them? It was a set of teeth. It was a set of teeth that I put over my own teeth. And I called the props person who was going to be working on the film. And he was phenomenal. And he communicated with my dentist. And my dentist took a cast of my own teeth. And over top of that cast, this gentleman made a set of false teeth for me that I attached to my own teeth. And small things like that. And I kept explaining to my dentist, you probably won't see any difference, but it's for me. It's part of my process of inhabiting Paul. Yeah. And God bless her. She took the cast of my own teeth, and this gentleman, whose name I'm blanking on right now, and I'm really embarrassed because he was phenomenal. And he made me these teeth, these false teeth, upper and lower. And that became part of my process of inhabiting and creating Paul. And it's a tiny thing. Most audiences will not see it. My son, we had a screening, Spike had a screening for the cast. And my son and myself and my wife watched the film here at the house. And at a certain point, my son said, "Dad, what's wrong with your teeth?"
Your son noticed.
He did notice, but most other people will not.
Oh my gosh. I was going to say, like, I'm going to go back and, watch it again just to see, but,
I'm not going to, there are two scenes in particular, and I'm not going to tell you what they were. And I will not tell you the scene where my son said, "Dad." But there is a scene when you catch a glimpse. And if anybody who's like really paying attention, you will see it. But it's very subtle. And it really had to do with my own process and my own work.
That's the challenge. No, it's truly an incredible film, powerful and memorable. And it makes you want to go and dive down the history books and
absolutely
read their stories.
There's a film called Hearts and Minds, which won the Academy Award. It's about Vietnam vets. I believe it won an Academy Award in 1976. You can watch that. There's something called The Anderson Platoon, which is a short doc that focuses on a platoon that is led by an African-American officer. And in Vietnam, that was rare. Mm-hmm. I looked at that. Ken Burns's documentary series on Vietnam, even though I have much respect for Ken Burns, but I was disappointed watching that there were not more African-American vets that were focused on. But it was edifying for me to watch that. Look at read BLOODS. I mean, there's a lot of material out there that's worth engaging if you want to learn about Vietnam.
So next up for you, after the Five Bloods, you've got Harlem's Kitchen, in which you play an executive chef called Ellis Rice.
You've done your homework. I'm impressed. Wow.
Wait, are you actually a good cook, though? That is the question, especially now we're in quarantine and cooking meals a day.
Yes, I can cook, and I know my way around the kitchen. I will admit, because I didn't get married until later in life, and so I was single for many, many years. And yes, I can cook. I am not intimidated by the kitchen. I will admit that my lady does the vast majority of the kitchen of the cooking. And that's just me being lazy, and I'm admitting this to whomever it is that's watching that. But the answer to your question is yes, I can cook.
All right, what's the dish? What's your pièce de résistance?
I have a vegetable fried rice dish that I can.
All right.
Yeah, I can do that.
All right, last question, then I'll let you go. what's the greatest piece of advice you've ever received in your career?
Before I answer that question, going back to Harlem's Kitchen, you've clearly done your homework. And what I want to say about Harlem's Kitchen is I am tantalized by the prospect of investigating this family. I hope to God, and I'm saying that because the creator and showrunner, his name is Zahir McGee, and Zahir is, even though we're not sure what the future is, he's been continuing to write. And he just sent me, all of us, he sent all the cast, the 3rd episode. So I've read, there's the pilot, then the 2nd and the 3rd. And my reaction to the 3rd episode in particular was one of excitement at the prospect of getting to investigate these people, psychologically and emotionally. And he's got a lot of good stuff in there. So I hope we get to explore that and that audiences get to see it. I will say it is a very different kind of work than Good Fight, very different genre, but it's tantalizing. The prospect of investigating Ellis Rice and the Rice family is tantalizing. To your question, the best piece of advice I have been given as an actor, was that your question?
Yeah. Yeah.
The best piece of advice that I have been given as an actor is, and I didn't know it was the best piece of advice at the time that it was being given to me. I have learned to appreciate this. And I do not remember the exact words. I remember who gave me this advice, but essentially what he was saying was, the entertainment industry is in fact a very small industry, and everybody talks to everybody. Everybody talks to everybody. So it is incumbent on all of us to be aware of how we present ourselves. And I say that as somebody who has not always been sufficiently cognizant of that. And particularly in context of the fact that the entertainment industry is not a meritocracy, and there are various other components that contribute to one's success or lack thereof. It is incumbent on all of us to understand, and one does not have to be obsequious. One does not have to lose oneself and do things that one is not comfortable doing. That's the challenge. One has to maintain a sense of oneself, but understand that everybody talks to everybody in this industry. Be aware of that at all times and conduct yourself accordingly.
Love it. Love it. Delroy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For this chat and this conversation. And The Five Bloods is coming to Netflix June 12th. That's
right. And we want as many people to see it as possible.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
God bless. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
You too.